Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mentorship Monday. We are super excited to have you guys here for the April installment. I am Crystal Ivey, Mentorship Monday Committee Chair and a 2014 Terry MBA alumni. I am especially thrilled about today's event. And before I turn things over to our special moderator and panel, allow me to share a little bit more about Women of UGA signature program, our Mentorship Monday. It was established in 2018. Mentorship Mondays is a professional development series featuring notable UGA alumni. Each installment of the series offers new perspectives with keynote and panel style reflections, and it concludes with question and answer sessions. Since 2020, these ladies have continued to provide quality networking and professional development in the virtual format that we are now doing in our Mentorship Mondays in. So I am super excited about today's session, not only because of the amazing women we'll hear from today, but essentially this is officially welcoming the Latino Alumni Affinity Group and Council to Mentorship Monday. So super exciting to have this take part. Yes, I see Deborah super excited about that. So while this group has been in existence for a little over 5 years, this is officially their first program with the Alumni Association's Affinity Group family. So we are honored that they chose to partner with the Women of UGA to do this first event. I could go on and on about how wonderful this organization has been and all the things that they've been doing to work to connect alumni with current students, supporting through scholarship endeavors, participating in the Give That Dog a Bone card writing campaign, recruiting events, etc. But we only have an hour and we want to make sure that you guys get everything you want from this panel we have today. So what I'm going to actually do is introduce your moderator for today, Debbie Velazquez. And I'm sorry, Debbie, if I mispronounced your name, make sure you let me know when you start speaking. But Debbie is a 2013 Terry graduate who serves as the current Secretary and Financial Director for the Latino Alumni Council. In her professional life, Debbie is the Sales and Training Manager at Lexus, and she is actually joining us today from Mexico City, Mexico. So what a treat it is to have her today moderate this session. So thank you for serving as our moderator today. The floor is yours, and I am, again, just super excited and thrilled for what you ladies have in store for us today.
Crystal, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And yes, I know my last name is kind of interesting. It's Velazquez, but you had it, you were right, almost there. But no, thank you. It's so wonderful to be part of Mentorship Monday and contribute to the legacy of having brilliant and talented alumna, sharing advice with our Bulldog family, especially the 4 that we have today who are part of the Latino alumni family. I'm super excited to moderate this great convo with our panelists, and I know that y'all are ready to hear from them. So let me introduce you to the 4 of them. Genesis Castro is a strategy consultant within Deloitte's government and public service practice. Previously, she worked with Latino nonprofits in Georgia for more than 6 years. While working at the Latino Community Fund, she managed their capacity building programs, including membership, health and well-being, and entrepreneurship programs. Under her leadership, LCF Georgia worked with local partners to provide 13,000 vaccines in hard-to-reach communities throughout Georgia. She was named one of Georgia's 50 most influential Latinos in 2021 and is a 2020 30 Under 30 honorees for the Nonprofit Professionals Network of Atlanta. Outside of her work with nonprofits, she provides strategic support to the Latinx for Warnock Committee during the 2021 Senate runoff elections. She obtained her bachelor's degree in 2018 at Georgia from FACS and has a Master of Public Administration from Georgia State University. Thank you, Genesis, for joining us today. As a teacher educator in Mary Frances Early College of Education at UGA, Chantelle Grace strives to address social injustices through her work with social studies teachers candidates. From designing curriculum centered around race, diversity, equity, and inclusion to facilitating learning experiences that model culturally responsive approaches, Chantelle works endlessly to provide opportunities for her students to critically reflect on their growing identities and commitments as future social studies educators. In 2020, Chantelle was recognized for these efforts with an Outstanding Teaching Assistant Award from UGA Center for Teaching and Learning, which recognizes the top 10% of teaching assistants on campus demonstrating superior teaching skills while serving in the classroom. Chantelle has also been recognized by the UGA Career Center for her outstanding service to members of the class of 2020. Chantelle's soon-to-be triple MFE education dog, having having earned her bachelor and master's degree in 2012 and 2015, respectively. She graduates this upcoming summer with a PhD in educational theory and practice within social studies education, and she will then transition to her new role as a teaching faculty member at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, working to inspire the next generation of educators involved in the social studies education program there. Welcome, Chantelle. Thank you for being here. Adrianna Samaniego is a 2010 Terry grad and investor at Female Founders Fund, the largest seed fund investing in female-founded technology companies across B2B, consumer, healthcare, and fintech. Female Founders Fund has invested some of the fastest growing female-led startups, including Zola, Billy, CoStar, Maven Clinic, Rent the Runway, Peanut, K-Skin, Tala, Winky Lux, and more. In her role, she invests and supports portfolio companies that are building category-defining technology businesses. Prior to joining Female Founders Fund, she worked at JetBlue Ventures, Harlem Capital Partners, and New Media Ventures. Adrianna also spent 8 years in tech, formerly as co-founder and co-CEO at Area 120 Google Startup Incubator. In this role, she led a team to rapidly build and launch a B2B marketplace for Fortune 500 companies to procure from diverse-owned companies. Adrianna also formerly led and created Google's global supplier diversity program that created over $2 billion in opportunities for diverse-owned businesses. Welcome, Adrianna, to the panel. And last but certainly not least, we have Ms. Janay Stargell, graduated from the University of Georgia in 2009 with dual degrees in broadcast news and criminal justice. She previously worked as the faith-based non-government private sector coordinator for the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. In this position, she served the citizens of the state of Georgia after disaster via the assistance of faith-based, nonprofit, and private sector organizations. She also created a nationally recognized and utilized program for houses of worship called Praise and Preparedness, providing houses of worship with emergency response resources. Janay currently works for Truist Bank as a business continuity analyst. She uses her background in emergency management to assist business continuity teammates in the bank to create and maintain plans, ensuring business will continue in the event of a disruption or emergency. I don't know about y'all, but that's 4 amazing ladies joining us. Welcome. Thank you for being here, and thank you for gifting us your time. I know that nowadays that's limited, so we really, really appreciate it. So if you guys want to make sure and go ahead and unmute your mics when you're ready to speak, but I think we have some great questions to talk to the invitees of today, the attendees of today's session, to talk about professional growth in your careers. And I think we have 4 really great different perspectives of 4 different industries to cover. So kicking it off, whoever wants to take the first question, what has professional growth looked like for you personally in your own career development? Within that question, you can also cover your professional goals and what steps you plan on taking to help with your professional growth. Who wants to kick it off?
I'll kick it off. So for me, I feel professional growth has looked like remaining outside of the comfort zone. And my career to this point has been nothing that I thought it was going to be. Emergency management, business continuity, fell into all of that. I was on the path of journalism, graduated during the recession and thought, oh, we're going to go and fall back on this internship. They said, hey, if you need a job, come talk to us. And I'm like, hey, guess what? I'm talking. I need a job. And they're like, oh, but we're frozen. And I'm going, so is everybody else in the world. So I'm starting in retail. I graduate college and I start working in retail. And I'm going, I can't believe that I graduated from college and this is what I'm doing. I'm working in retail and I'm in the fitting rooms and don't even know what this entire purpose is for. But sitting here wondering, how am I going to grow, right, from starting in this, I guess, humble position of retail? And for me, it was gaining skills and honing skills that I already had. And I didn't realize that some of the academic knowledge that I learned or gained in journalism and criminal justice majors helped me and has continued helping me throughout this path. So I'm not a huge small talk lover. I find it to be painful, like shy of asking how the weather is. Like I'm not that, like I just can't do it. It's just painful for me. And so working in retail actually helped me to get better at, I mean, I can just kind of spur a conversation and keep it going. I'm listening hard to keep you talking, right? And I didn't realize how that would play a part in my GEMA role, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency, because my entire role there
was building relationships. I had to make sure I had partners in the nonprofit sector, the private sector, and the faith-based sector. And if I didn't have the ability to start conversations, if I didn't have the ability to build those relationships, authentic relationships, not just the ones that you're like, hey, I need you, can we talk? It was, they're sending memes. Hey, guess what? It's a sunny day. Look at us. Aren't we excited, right? And you always have these partners that, you gain these relationships. You have them not just when you are in time of need, but at the same time, even when you're no longer in that role, because I still have those partners and I still have those relationships to this day. So definitely, if I would have said, no, thanks, I don't know what I'm doing in emergency management. No, thanks, I'm not sure what business continuity is. I know enough just to keep conversations going. I would have never been able to have the opportunities that I've had now.
Awesome. Thank you, Janay. Anybody else want to add?
I think I can go. So for me, I'm really excited to be starting with Deloitte this June. Like Deborah mentioned, I come from a nonprofit background. And for me, professional development has really been having to take the reins of that and take ownership over that, even if I didn't know exactly how to go into these roles. So when I was graduating from UGA, I was working at a nonprofit. I knew I wanted to keep working for nonprofits. And because I was working at the Fanning Institute as a public service and outreach scholar, which is a program that I recommend for anyone who wants to go into public service, I knew I needed a master's degree to make a decent living working in nonprofits. And I'm really grateful that my family, I come from a family of teachers, immigrants who are all Spanish teachers, and they were able to figure out how to go to school, but it was really different for them. So for me, I felt really stressed. I remember sitting at the Fanning desk being like, how am I going to pay for grad school? Like, I'm already half student loans from undergrad. How am I going to do it? Mm-hmm. But thankfully, there were other grad students there who explained to me that you could get assistantships. And there was a grad student who even let me hear GRE books. I was able to study, and I got into Georgia State and UGA. Chose to go to Georgia State just to be closer to home. And then once I had, worked for nonprofits for a few years, it was working through the COVID pandemic, I knew it was time for me to shift to something else. And I wanted to shift to corporate. But again, I had never applied for a corporate job. Every job I had gotten was because I knew someone. So I had to really network, use the connections that I had made working in nonprofits to help me get into corporate. And so I remember just having to reach out to people, having to ask them, like, how did you apply for a corporate job? How does it work? Paying for LinkedIn Premium, taking the courses, and actually learned how to apply for corporate jobs, learned about the ATS system, which I had not learned about before. And so looking back, I'm really excited to be now working with Deloitte. I eventually want to go work in corporate social responsibility or work for a foundation that's able to fund other nonprofit ventures, specifically more, how do I say, innovative ones, because there are a lot of needs that cannot be met specifically with nonprofits or policy. But I think for me, when I think about my professional goals and what I've had to do to get here, it's really taking ownership and just not being afraid to ask for help, especially if you're a person of color, if you come from a minority background. A lot of people are happy to help, specifically because, maybe we don't come from families where people have had experience applying for corporate jobs or applying for our goals. So that's, I guess, what I'll say for now.
Yeah, no, thank you, Genesis. I mean, it sounds so far, Janay mentioned taking that leap of faith, trying something new that maybe you had already closed your mind off to, but then you are willing to push yourself. I mean, that's in essence pushing yourself within your career, and Genesis asking for help, which I think is easier said than done sometimes, especially depending on our backgrounds and how easy it is for us to be like, hey, I need help. Help me open this door. Help me get there. Chantelle, Adrianna, either one of you want to add anything to this question? If not, we can move on. No? Okay. So what are some steps that you ladies have taken to market yourselves? It sounds like, mentioned in the bios, you guys have jumped around a little bit, sometimes staying within the same realm, sometimes leaving it completely. So what do you do to prepare yourself to market yourself for new opportunities?
I can start with that one. So I was recently on the job market this fall, and that was like one thing I think that was really challenging actually for myself, because I'm not used to bragging or like, I'm very humble. And so to actually have to sit, in interviews and actually like talk about myself and sell myself to potential like universities I was applying to, I did find to be hard. But I had, speaking to what you said, Genesis is kind of like asking for help, and I had great professors who were mentors for me. And so having them kind of guide me in that process was helpful. And so one thing that I found really helpful that they shared with me is to kind of like hone in on like 3 qualities that you like really think highly of yourself about, and that speak a lot to who you are, your values, but also what you will bring to the table. And so I remember when I was preparing for interviews, like I had it written down, like what are the three, and then some like bullet points underneath like those three kind of like themes, to then give more specifics as to like what I mean by that. So like one of mine was being a passionate teacher educator, and who is committed to social justice, and how I would go giving examples and underneath that, like what have I done to exhibit that. And then being a proud mother scholar, that was like really important to me, because it's like, it's not like I'm doing this work for my son and that there's going to be a better future for him. But also like recognizing like being a mom is a really important part of my identity. And so wherever I was going to go, I wanted them to be aware, like, you know, I'm bringing that with me, like that's my family. And so like that was important to me. And then also just talking about some of my research. And so what was important about the focus of my research, you know, being centered on race, diversity, equity, inclusion, and helping them understand like why are those values so important to me, given like personal experiences I have had, my husband has had, and my family has had. So when it came to marketing myself, I think it was just like really honing in on those like qualities that I think really spoke to who I was, but also I felt could set me apart in a sense, from other people applying. So that way they can understand like, who is Chantelle, like who are we talking to here? And they would have something to like remember me by. So don't tell them your whole life story, but like really hone in on the like few qualities that you think are important. I think is one way I have found to be successful in kind of marketing myself to others.
Thanks, Chantelle, good advice.
I can chime in as well. So I think, well, first, hi, everyone, really excited to be here. I think what helped me early on in marketing myself was an organization called MLT, specifically for anyone who's interested in anything business related. Like that organization was critical, because what Chantelle said is exactly what I struggled with early on in my career, which is I was taught like, be humble, put your head down, work, and then if you work hard enough, you will be, you know, seen for that work, the accomplishments will come, the recognition will come. In corporate, that's not how it worked, at least in my experience. There are people who, you know, could do less, but shout, you know, from the rooftop when they complete everything. And I was let me get down and I'm going to put my head down and work really hard. And so the marketing and that self-advocacy had to be taught. I really, really had to practice that. So MLT was fantastic at that. You know, I don't care what career you're in, whether public, private, you should have an elevator pitch. You should have, you know, there's not a conversation. The way that I started doing things is every time I have a conversation, whether it's career oriented, non-career oriented, I want to leave that conversation with them understanding, you know, who I am in terms of like my values, but what I'm passionate about. And that's, you know, the work that I do. And so I just started, you know, branding myself early on in my career as this expert of diverse entrepreneurship, diverse owned businesses. Like anytime somebody would bring that up, it could be in San Francisco, it could be in New York, and they'd be like, have you talked to Adrianna? Because that was all I was talking about. And so that was like what I was known for, and how I created this wedge really on this opportunity. And it scared me a little bit early on, because I'm like, I'm not an expert in anything, but I was so passionate about it. And it allowed me to become more comfortable, and then eventually, you know, advocate myself into creating my own job around that work. And so I do think that you have to like practice it, especially one as women of color. It's not easy to do those things. It's not easy to shout out the rooftop, you know, this is who I am, you know, what my brand is, that you have a brand. But it's such an important thing that you have to do, in my opinion, to kind of get from point A to Z.
Thank you. Genesis or Janay, anything y'all want to add?
I'll add, I mean, I think especially as students, I mean, I've hoped that you guys are getting involved on campus with different organizations. That's something you continue to do once you go into the professional world. But if you're having trouble marketing yourself, just think like, what am I already doing? And that's probably going to help you figure out what you can say. I think for me, I just always got involved in Latino organizations. as my job professionally, but also outside of it. So it's really easy for me to like look back and say, okay, well, obviously I have a lot of experience working with diverse individuals, hard to reach communities, creating programming for them. So it made it a lot easier. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think marketing yourself and advocating for yourself, they kind of go hand in hand depending on the scenario, right? I mean, I'm sure there's times where maybe you guys wanted a promotion or a move or an opportunity, and it's like, okay, now that I've already marketed myself to get here, how do now I advocate for myself to get that chance? I don't know if there's as an example of a time that really stays clear in your mind that you're like, I had to do that. Do any of y'all have an example like that where you had to really advocate for yourself and push for something?
I actually had to push for the role, not the role, but the title, I guess, that I have right now. I was sitting on a call one day and they pull up the organizational chart. And at the time I had the heaviest workload. And so in my head, I'm looking at these names that have senior in front of their title. And I'm going, wait, what? How does this happen? Right. And I kept thinking, I was like, well, no, they've been here longer, right? I start listing off those justifications, the bullets of why I'm not in the same place. I haven't been here as long. I'm not. But then I really had to sit back and say, but let's look at what you're doing, right? Let's look at the value that you're adding to the team. And that is when at my next one-on-one, my boss sat down and said, what do you want to talk about? And I said, let's talk about a senior title. And it was almost like stepping out of my body, like, who is this person, right? Because this is not the type of person that I am. And it's interesting when I was sharing this with my family and they were like, you actually sat and asked your boss for that? Like, I mean, even they were shocked, right? Because it's something that if we don't advocate for ourselves, no one else is going to. There's not a team lead. There's not, and my manager knows the workload. He knew what I had going on, but because I'm not asking for it, I always say a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And so at the end of the day, I was not going to get what I needed. I wasn't going to get the compensation, the title, whatever. And for me, it wasn't about the title. It's just recognize what I'm doing, right? And so that was my push of this is what I've been doing, and this is why I feel I deserve this. And it took a little bit of work. It was not I agree, right? My boss did say he agreed, but of course he has to go up the chain, and it's a push. It was a fight. It took over a year for that title to go, hey, Janay, by the way, congrats. So it's something that is not going to be an overnight thing, but definitely push through.
Right. I really appreciate that, what you said, Janay. One of the things that I've always done in all of my entire career and positions is because I actually had a bad experience when I started at Google, where I was not promoted and everyone else around me was, and it was actually the 2 women of color that were not promoted in a large team. And so what I started to do is if you have one-on-ones with a manager, and if you don't have them, set them up, be proactive, have agenda, etc. But what I started to do is every quarter I would have a conversation, not that sometimes we think that a manager's role is to develop. Most managers are not trained nor capable of doing that. They get to that level, and so then it unlocks management, opportunities. But unfortunately, even at corporate where there's a lot of resources, I have yet to see like fantastic management training. There's a lot of startups that I'm looking at that are creating those things. But what I started to do was every single quarter, I started from like that bad experience taking control. My development is in my hands, no one else's. And so I need to drive those conversations. And so every single quarter I would have a conversation with my direct manager and often their manager too, to understand, what does it look like for me to perform at that next level? How am I doing now? But what does it look like? What do I need to do to get to whatever level, title, etc.? And clearly having somebody on the other end articulate, these are the expectations, because if you're in a small and or large organization, oftentimes there's these gray areas. And if you're bringing that up constantly, they're going to say like, okay, well, Adrianna clearly cares about this, and I've already set these expectations. And the next quarter, I'm like, last time you said these 2 things, this is one where I think there's a little bit of an opportunity, but I'm excited to share that I've done XYZ, and I was meticulous at documenting everything that year, like every single year here, because when you're doing your reviews, you don't want it to take like your performance reviews or whatever. It should be an easy thing that you can just like go back to that doc where it could be a dump of things that you've worked on, accomplishments, etc. It makes it so much easier. So when you're going into those meetings at the end of the year, that performance review, they've heard you mention it at least 4 times, throughout that year. And it's not at the end where you're scared, you're like, I haven't brought it up. It just becomes this regular conversation. And then you have that document that you could refer back to of like, hey, this is exactly how I'm doing. I would rate myself here on these, but I would like to hear what you think. And it makes it a lot easier, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. I feel like there's several audience members that feel the same way, and they're going through similar experiences. So really quick, just since we're on the topic, they reached out and said, do you all have advice on navigating negative workplaces or dealing with difficult leadership in the workplace? I don't know if anybody
document everything. Unfortunately, some of those experiences, I've had great managers, but I've also had some not so great ones. And so just having a documentation on my end of what's happening, I think is important. I know this takes a lot of courage, but try to have that conversation. That's why also mentorship like if you have a manager and their peers, finding somebody at their peer level and or above, and I would go above, who you can confine in and ask, this is what I'm experiencing. I'd like to get advice. And then the last thing that I would say is, if life is too short, you should not be staying in a position you're miserable in. If you're not being treated with respect and you're not feeling valued, go, during your lunchtime and start looking at opportunities that excite you. Because oftentimes I see a lot of people not move due to fear of not having, fear of, the security, etc. But once you start exploring and seeing that you meet the requirements of other jobs, it gets you to think and just apply. But you shouldn't stay in a position where you're not happy, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think too, just adding to that, it's important to understand the culture at your workplace and what you value. So there's some people who are all about structure, right? There's some people who are not about structure. It's an example, right? But you have to know, do you care about structure? And that should determine whether or not you stay with the job, because there's some managers, like Adrianna said, not everyone's trained how to be a good manager, but it's also could just be that it's not a good cultural match, which is something that you need to figure out for yourself. And I think it takes time and also trial and error to decide, okay, I thought I liked this, but now I don't. Now I know, so I'm going to go somewhere else.
Absolutely. Using the networks, right? Like using these kind of networks to, like Adrianna said, during your lunchtime, you're doing it right now, connecting and meeting people and continuing that. We all have so many, just being UGA alumni, we have a lot of resources available, but using any of your networks, I think, like everyone mentioned, is super crucial. Adrianna mentioned mentorship. So who's someone maybe that y'all look up to for inspiration or mentorship, and has it been valuable in your careers and in your professional growth? Could one of you guys maybe take that and let us know?
I can start. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it. Nope, go for it.
Okay. So mine's not like a well-known person, maybe like outside of academia, I'm not sure, but Dr. Cynthia Dillard, she is a wonderful professor. She's the Mary Frances Early Professor in the College of Ed before she actually just got appointed as the new dean at the University of Seattle. So she has recently left and started her role there. But she is someone for me who inspires me of how she embodies her values in her being. So like when you're in her presence, you just see this genuine care, understanding, and how she just like, I don't know, she moves through the world in a particular way that I want to move through the world, where, I'm still fighting for things that matter and are important to me, but I do it in a way that's like graceful, and it resonates with people to the point, doesn't feel like I'm pushing it on anybody, but like just my way of being is inspiring to other people. And so she's someone that comes to mind. Like I said, it's not like a celebrity or anything, but in like academia, she is like one. And I think I realized how blessed I was to be able to work with her, because then I see how many other people like are like dying to meet her. And I'm like, wow, like was able to have her on my committee for a short time, and just like learning from her in those small moments of how to advocate for myself, like how to believe in myself and what I'm doing, and celebrating the small moments all along the way of my professional growth. Because I think that was something else I had to grow in, is just like, seeing everybody else kind of take every step of the way as like, oh, that's supposed to happen. She's like, no, like you celebrate those moments. This is big, especially, you know, for people of color who aren't, you know, seen as supposed to be in these spaces. And it's like, no, you carve that space out for yourself and you celebrate every moment in which you're making progress towards your professional goals. And so like, yeah, she's just someone that comes to mind as like, I want to embody those same values and goals in the same way as she does, and move through the world in the same way.
I was just going to talk about how valuable mentorship has been to my professional career and my growth, because I've had, thankfully, several different mentors, and different genders, different races, ethnicities, and they've all brought a different perspective. And I think so often when I'm more apt to limiting myself, they push me, they ask the questions, and they've pushed to make me see something different, so that if I'm saying, oh, well, I'm not qualified for this role, they're saying, but why aren't you, right? What makes you feel like you're not qualified? Because we have these soft transferable skills, right? Each thing that we've done, we've got these transferable skills that have been growing. It's kind of snowballing into something that, yeah, we don't know the niche role that we may be looking at, but I think they just give us that bird's eye view perspective that we need. And so there was a gentleman that I had when I was working for Vima. He was the director. And there were times that I would have to remember he's the director. So you can't just like walk into his office like, hey, let's talk. I've got some issues, right? Or, you know, I need your guidance. But one of the things that he said that always stuck with me was, your job is what you do. It's not who you are. And it's just nuggets like that mentors provide, not necessarily always looking at your career and, you know, this is what you need to do to be successful, right? It's giving you those life nuggets and allowing you to be inspired, to have those people in your circle that you're going, wow, I can't believe that I get to have you as part of my group, my, you know, wise tribe, for lack of a better phrase. And so I think that mentorship is 100% an amazing and beneficial and necessity for professional growth in your career, because it's not just a network, hey, hi, how you doing? But it's a true relationship that you end up taking with you.
I think it's mentorship is critical, and Chantelle and Janay already shared like some of the characteristics. I've always thought of mentorship as, or the people who I've admired, like in terms of me as a mentor, I really feel like I'm just holding up the mirror in front of that person and reminding them and empowering them, like, you have everything that you need. Oftentimes we just need to see it, you know, from somebody else's perspective, or step back. But it's about finding somebody who is going to empower you, who you feel comfortable with, and know that there's no career out there where there's like maybe a few statistically, but where you're carving the path. Like the path has been carved, the doors are open. And so making it harder on ourselves to be like, I have to struggle and do this by myself, and I can't ask for help. We have to move beyond that. And that may take vulnerability, that may take, a lot of things, but ultimately there's somebody on the other side who's done it, who has like carved that path for you. And so leaning into them. And I haven't had somebody who has like said no. And I think the only other thing that I would say is mentorship is a two-way street. Your mentor is only as good as you are, meaning you really have to nurture that relationship. I think that's the hardest part about mentorship is a lot of quote unquote like mentees feel like, oh, well, I can't ask for their time. No, you can just be deliberate about it, and, nurture that relationship, because ultimately, they and you are going to get something out of it only if you're really, really like putting the water, taking the time, asking for their time. Don't feel like I can't ask for their time. No, that's what they're there for. You need to ask for their time. And so I would just be really conscious about those people that you're surrounding yourself with, and know that, if they're taking a call with you, that means they see something and they're excited and they want to help you. And so take their help.
Thank you, Adrianna. Thank you, Chantelle and Janay, for that feedback. I think it's really important. Mentorship has got me to where I am today. So I know that without it, it's really crucial in the professional growth of any of our careers in any industry. And I think another point, maybe, I don't know if you guys have had it, but when you've had to switch industries perhaps, and maybe you don't have mentorships in that industry, any advice on how to find someone in something completely different than where you're at? I don't know if y'all have had to have that scenario yet in any of y'all's career, but I can see maybe that being a question.
I'm sorry. I thought you were
No, no, you're fine.
I said, I would say just put yourself in positions where you will meet people. Like for me, again, I had never worked a corporate job, but I went to Latino nonprofit events, and sometimes there would be corporate sponsors. So I would just be talkative and talk to people. And I met a guy who worked at Delta, who's from the same part of New York, Washington Heights, where my family's from. So we connected. And eventually, when I left the Latino Community Fund, like I was able to ask him for help. But I think too, being at UGA, there's clubs, there's HSA, there's women's clubs. There's a lot of clubs at UGA where you can meet people. And even if they're not a corporate now, like a lot of my friends from UGA are now in corporate, I was also able to ask them for help.
Right. Thank you. I've actually, funny story, I've had someone like DM me, ask me for help because they saw I had posted something for work, and like they did not know me. I think our only connection was we went to UGA, and they're like, hey, you're doing this. How can I do that? Like just straight up, like did not know me. And really appreciate it. And we had really good conversation from it. So don't be afraid to literally reach out to someone maybe that you don't know, especially in this world that we live such social media based environment. I don't think it's not weird anymore to do that, obviously within professional context and how you approach the conversation. So if you guys could go back in time and talk to yourself at the beginning of your careers, what advice would you give yourself?
I can go. I would say to be less fearful, to take more risks. I think I think I would have, I'm in like a great place now, but it took me like Janay said, I don't think all careers, at least mine was linear. And I took pretty large risks, but it took me a couple of years to do that. And so I would have definitely told myself to just take bigger leaps faster. And yeah.
I think for me, I would have asked more questions because I think, I don't know, I had this like imposter syndrome, right? Am I supposed to be in this place pursuing a PhD? Am I supposed to be working in higher ed? Like, am I made out to be at a big university? And so like, I was always scared to ask questions because I felt like it was assumed I was supposed to know certain things. And again, it was just like implied. And so I would be more vocal in asking questions. I would also trust my gut instinct because I found along the way of my professional growth that like what I thought would be the end result was not actually what I was actually passionate about. So I'm going into a teaching faculty role where I don't have to do research. And originally I thought I was going to be like, an assistant professor doing teaching and research until I found out like, oh, I like research, but it's not really my passion. Teaching is. And so I think trusting those instincts too, and like, because a lot of times I was being told like, this is the route you're supposed to take in academia, and realizing that route wasn't for me, and trusting that and pursuing that, I think was really something I just wish I would have remembered and knew it from the beginning, because it was just saved me a lot of heartache of constantly wrestling with, am I in the right path and doing what I'm supposed to do? And then lastly, believing in yourself. Like, I think from the beginning, like I questioned again, am I supposed to be in this place? As like one of the few people of color, and like then starting to push envelopes and bringing things to light, like that conversations that needed to happen, and just believing like, no, like, that's okay. Like, you're supposed to be doing that. Like, it shouldn't be scary to do those things. And then I think, honestly, when I did end up getting the job I did get at Florida State starting in the fall, it was like, after a moment where I realized, like, no, like, I'm made to be here. I'm supposed to be doing this work. And like, I am it. So I think once I finally believed in that, and like, I wish I would have knew that sooner, I stopped questioning so much. I think that's really when I started to thrive, and just seeing myself as being powerful and my work being powerful. So yeah, those are things I would go back to tell myself to remember as I was going through that journey, because it would have been really helpful.
Thank you.
I would say remain open-minded and go with it. And it's kind of interesting to think about that. But I was the person that in college had the 5-year, 10-year plan, and then all of that blew up. And I was like, so I'm left with the pieces of my plan. That's interesting. Let's see what happens, right? And so I kept the open mind, because there were a lot of times, like I said in the beginning, that I wanted to say, I have no idea what this is. I don't know what I'm doing. No, thanks. But if I would have received the plan, or if I was able to take that plan that I had planned for myself and would have gotten to the top, I guess, like I wanted to, like that linear path that Adrianna was just talking about, I would not have had half of the skills that I needed, because each place that I've been, each step that I've taken, I have learned, gained, and honed skills that are necessary to get to my next step. And I'm a firm believer that there's a certain path that you have to take before you can make that next move. And so I would definitely just remain open-minded and go with it.
I think I would say just be more open and be more curious. When I was graduating, I was very set, like, I want to work for nonprofits. So I was part of a program where we had recruiters from Deloitte come. But because like no one else in the program was like me, the recruiters were like me, I was like, they don't know, they don't understand me, it's not for me. But looking back, I'm like, wow, I could have like gained a lot more skills, learned a lot more if I would have gone into the private sector earlier. Not that I regret my public sector experience, because I've made the best of it, and I think I have created a network and skills for myself. But I would just say be more open-minded, and especially if you want to go into like a helping profession or like a service-oriented profession, there are a lot of ways in the private sector where you can make a difference and also have a higher salary.
Thank you, ladies. We actually do have a question from the audience regarding the conversation we had about title and concrete next steps. They want to know, how often do you suggest following up? I want to strike the balance of continuing to advocate for myself, but also not turning them off by bringing it up too often. Any advice on how to have that combo and how much following up we should be doing?
I think. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think the only question I have, or like clarification, would just be, in your organization, is it standardized? So like in some organizations, there's a process in place. This is, how often you're getting calibrated or reviews. Here's the, expectations. There's transparency around the leveling and things of that nature. If you operate in one of those organizations, then you kind of have these markers of when to do it. My recommendation is, outside of those markers, which usually there's like a mid-year and end of year, call it, for those larger organizations, I would have on a quarterly basis a gut check, call it that, where it's just like, I just want to check with you. This is, what I'm seeing. This is what you mentioned, how I'm feeling, the areas that I'm working on. I think I'm doing really well in XYZ, would like to get your feedback. That on a quarterly basis is fine. And you see the way that I'm talking it, I'm mentioning it. I'm not saying, am I ready for vice president? Like, that's not what you also got to make it on the other end, which you have to understand the person you're talking to has to advocate and have that language as well. So you need to give them all that on a platter so they can go and advocate, because they have other people that they're speaking to on your behalf. And so just understanding, here's the game. And I call it a game because I think it's a game. Here are the expectations, the rules of the game in my organization, and when to have those conversations. If you're in the other camp where, maybe it's a startup and you don't have those processes in place, Maybe, you know, it's the public sector. And so my recommendation, if you're in the other camp and there's less standardization, is to start putting those standards in place. I work at an organization, I work at a team of 5 people. We had no performance reviews. We had nothing. And so what I did is I was like, well, that doesn't work well with my style. And I created it for us and said, I started speaking to other people. How do you do this? What's the best, you know? And then I'm like, I have an idea. This is what I was thinking. I would love for us to do like a mid-year for myself. And I basically created it for the entire fund. And that way it also goes to show your leadership. You should, in my opinion, if they're not doing it, if your management, your CEO, et cetera, if that's an area outside of their scope and maybe not a priority, do it for yourself. And then obviously others get to benefit from that. And so I've been in both organizations, and I think you just have to understand the game expectations. Quarterly, in my opinion, is fine. If it doesn't exist, create those processes.
Thank you, Adrianna. Janay, did you want to add or?
No, I mean, that's perfect. In my situation, when I was actually trying to push for it, it was it was definitely during those mid-year reviews, annual reviews, because that was one of the questions that for my organization, that's one of the things that's asked is, you know, what are your next steps? Where do you see yourself? What are your goals? Are you happy in this role? And so that's the time that I truly was able to carve out, and we're focused, both my manager, myself, we're both mentally focused on this is what we're going to speak about. It's not just a fleeting thought of, oh yeah, during a one-on-one. So use those times if you have them for that. And I think I did throw in a couple of reminders, like after 6 months and I didn't hear anything in a one-on-one, I was like, by the way, where are we on this this title? You know, and it wasn't the title, it was more about the standard. A reminder, yes, Jazz, a reminder never hurts anyone.
I think it's easier to have those conversations outside of when your, you know, company is doing it. Some managers you should kind of get a sense of the style for the person. And if you know they may be thrown off guard by you know, here's my one-on-one, and then you're like, I would like to talk about my career, and they're on the defense, then give them a heads up where you have a one-on-one dedicated to that. And it's like calling career. And then at the end of it, ask them how they've navigated it. You know, their own experience. You'll get them more comfortable because, again, at most organizations, it requires the person who is your direct manager to advocate and calibrate for you. And there's other managers in the room who are doing the same thing for their people. So you have to arm them with that information. But if they're not comfortable, and if you think about if you're on a team of 10, you're one of 10 people they're kind of looking after, and their development is their hands. And so some people may go on the defense, others are reactive, others are proactive. Just try to understand what flavor they are of a manager, hands-on, hands-off. Are they going to be taken aback by this? And prep them in advance.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if anybody else has any more questions. If anybody has one, this is the moment.
So I see somebody asked, it's not standard. I'm advocating for a new position to be created. So I did that. And in those, you have to be, Lydia asked this. I think you have to be, you said flexibility. I think you have to be incredibly entrepreneurial, and they take a little bit more time. The way that I've always approached it is a lot of data. So I've just provided a lot of information as to why this is needed. I've, in some ways, pretty much was doing the job at the same time of my other job to showcase the value that it could unlock for the company, and that I was the right person to do it. And so I would pretty much, that's what I would advise, which is if you can, try to do it in small ways, the job that you're trying to create, and showcase a proposal with a lot of data and information as to why this needs to be created and how it would be created, meaning everyone has a lot of things going on in their core roles. So if you're asking for something new to be created, most people are like, I just don't have the capacity to do this right now. So you make it easy and say, look, and I know things are really busy, but this is how I would set it up. This is my recommendation. So it's like, in a box where you're doing it essentially.
Thank you, Lydia, for that question. I don't see anything else coming in. No. Well, if nobody else has any questions, thank you, ladies, for your time today on a Monday. I know sometimes it can get crazy, so I really, really appreciate it. And I'm going to kick it off to Verna. Verna, I think you may be on mute.
Thank you so much. Sorry. Yep, what a great session. Thank you all to the 4 panelists for sharing such great wisdom and advice and just insight from their backgrounds. On behalf of the Women of UGA Leadership Council, thank you to everyone for attending today's session. We are so thrilled to remind everyone that Mentorship Monday will continue to expand. The Black Alumni Leadership Council will host the May session, so stay tuned and also stay tuned for chapters across the nation starting in the fall. You'll not want to miss anything that we have in store for you. I want to take a moment to thank everyone who supported the Endowed Women of UGA Scholarship Fund. Thanks to our supporters like you, the Endowed Fund continues to grow. If you haven't already, there is still time to join us this fiscal year as we increase our giving to impact outstanding scholars and help break down financial barriers to quality education. So far, we have raised $10,000 since July 1st and encourage everyone to make a gift before the fiscal year ends on June 30th. So now stay connected with everyone at UGA by visiting the calendar on the alumni website. There are some great events coming up. For example, this weekend, the Ponce City Market rooftop takeover by the Young Alumni Council is on Sunday, April 21st. This is a fun, family-friendly event, so definitely bring your kids if you've got them, or just grab your favorite group of friends and go. It's going to be a great time. It has been a great event in the past. And then one last tip for everyone, make sure to follow the Alumni Association and Women of UGA on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. At this time, we want to give everyone who would like to depart just a few moments to do so before we open up all of the breakout rooms. Everyone will be randomly assigned to enjoy a discussion and just further the conversation and the takeaways from today. On behalf of the Women of UGA, thank you for attending, and go Dawgs.